briefing by Lieutenant General Igor Kirillov, Chief of Russian military's nuclear, biological and chemical protection troops. The potential risks of American dual-use programs both inside and outside the country have been repeatedly emphasized by the Russian Ministry of Defense. It should be noted that none of the facts presented by the Russian Ministry of Defense regarding U.S. biological research have been disputed or refuted. In an effort to justify itself, Washington argues that all of the work is being done to ensure global biosecurity and is being done in the national interests of the United States. Prior to the consultative meeting of parties to the Biological and Toxic Weapons Convention in Geneva in September 2022, the U.S. Department of State stated that the goal of the Pentagon's Cooperative Threat Reduction Program is to, quote, improve human and animal health and control infectious disease outbreaks. In light of statements by the World Health Organization about outbreaks of Marburg fever, Lassa fever, anthrax, cholera in different regions of the world, the extremely difficult situation with economically significant animal diseases, African swine fever, pathogenic avian influenza, foot and mouth disease, the height of foolishness appears to be the work done at Boston University to increase the pathogenic properties of pathogens such as COVID-19, so-called directed evolution, changes that may or may not take tens or hundreds of years in nature, and to create artificial viruses with a higher risk of infecting humans. An analysis of documents, some of which were obtained during the special military operation, shows that such research on enhancing the functions of dangerous passengers conducted, included in the states of Central Asia and Transcaucasia, is systematic, and large U.S. pharmaceutical companies are involved in its implementation. It has to be stressed that the Ministry of Health of one of the Central African states is studying the possibility of artificial spread of the Ebola virus in September 2022. The concern stems from the fact that the Sudan strain is completely identical to the virus that circulated in Africa during the 2012 epidemic. One theory is that negligent handling of the pathogen by U.S. military biologists working in the region. Note the U.S. Senate's request to the Department of Health regarding Pfizer Corporation's directed evolution research. The request seeks to assess the credibility of information obtained by the U.S. non-for-profit organization Project Veritas from Pfizer's Director of Research and Development, Jordan Walker. He stated that the company was using the opportunity of directed evolution research to improve the effectiveness of its vaccines. Commenting on approaches to creating new vaccine drugs, Walker said, quote, we don't mutate it ourselves, we focus on creating, proactively developing new vaccines. Thus, the Pfizer employee admits to conducting directed evolution research aimed at gaining competitive advantage and increasing profits. Walker's statements are backed up by those of former Pfizer employee Karen Kingston. She explicitly stated that the U.S. pharmaceutical company's products, quote, are by definition biological weapons. In doing so, she refers to the U.S. law, which defines a biological weapon as any biological agent, toxin or delivery device, the definition of which includes vaccines with mRNA technology. This type of vaccine has reportedly been developed with U.S. government funding since 2017, and by the time it became commercially available, it was understood that it could cause comorbidities and serious complications such as meningitis, anaphylactic shock, acute myocardial infarction, and stroke. Drugs from Pfizer and Moderna, which have previously been awarded multi-billion-dollar government contracts, have also been suggested as a treatment for the adverse effects of vaccination. Such a strategy enables American pharmaceutical companies to profit from the appearance of novel infections to the fullest extent possible. The establishment of global biological control is the primary goal of U.S. bioprograms. As we have frequently brought to your attention, a move to U.S. standards for the transmission and collection of biological information, the deterioration of national health systems, and the imposition of medical equipment and medicine supplies are frequently the outcomes of selective assistance to participating governments in the programs. Along with this, military research facilities are being built near the borders of geopolitical rivals. In addition, harmful microorganism strains unique to particular regions are being gathered, and dangerous medications are being tested on humans. According to its functionality and level of biosafety, established laboratories can be divided into three categories: The purpose of the first-level laboratory is to gather microorganism strains and their vectors from endemic areas and to prepare biomaterials for subsequent transmission. Second-level labs prepare state collections of microbial strains for export overseas, in addition to conducting research on the pathogens of extremely serious infectious diseases. Third-level labs are outfitted with maximum biological containment facilities and are entrusted with gathering data on the biological situation in certain states whose territories the Pentagon intends to employ for the development of its military contingents. Other international law norms are replaced by US efforts to establish global biological control with their own regulations, which are developed in the US interests, supported by the West as a whole, and imposed for execution on third parties. As a result, the United States is allowed to carry out biological research wherever in the world. The states taking part in this study also lose their national sovereignty in terms of biosafety and become totally reliant on the United States. The Russian Ministry of Defense has repeatedly highlighted the role of the US company EcoHealth Alliance in US military biological projects, following which the company's activities have come under scrutiny in the United States itself. The US Department of Health initiated an investigation of the company and evaluated the effectiveness of oversight activities. DHS's Office of Inspector General report says that NIH did not effectively monitor or take timely action to address EcoHealth's compliance with some requirements, anticipated to create, use, or transfer enhanced potential pandemic pathogens. It was discovered that the corporation had neglected to report the nature of the study being done in a timely manner, and that the oversight body had failed to act promptly to reduce the risks associated with this kind of research. According to the report's findings, the regulatory body, the US National Institutes of Health, NIH, is not equipped to efficiently monitor the distribution of federal grants, comprehend the nature of the research being done, pinpoint potential problem areas, and implement the necessarily corrective measures. The inability of the US administration to ensure the necessary level of control over dual-use research carried out in the country is also confirmed by other documents. On 27th of January 2023, for example, a panel of experts from the United States National Biosecurity Research Advisory Council submitted a report to assess the effectiveness of existing biosafety legislation. The report addressed dual-use research and research into the increased potential of pandemic infection, two of the major topics of great concern to the BWC. It also cites inadequate monitoring of biological research as its main areas of concern. The paper once again calls for greater transparency and for contractors, whether public or private, to be required to notify oversight bodies of their goals, objectives, and potential risks, whether they are conducting experiments within or outside the United States. Since the time that talks on a legally binding protocol to the convention was stalled, such calls to the US leadership have not been heard for more than 20 years. Nevertheless, the White House is not disposed to listen, not even to the advice of its own experts. The Russian Federation's disclosure of US military and biological activities outside its national territory makes a growing number of countries wonder about the real reasons for the presence of US research facilities on their territory. At the end of December 2022, members of the Macabean opposition bloc called on the Philippine Congress to investigate Pentagon activities at the Regional Animal Disease Diagnostic Laboratory in Tarlac City. The parliamentarians' appeal points out that the U.S. Defense Threat Reduction Agency has overt and covert military objectives in the Philippines which may not coincide with Manila's interests. In their appeal, members of Parliament demand that the U.S. military begin to examine the work of the Department of Justice, the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Department of Health, as well as the National Defense Agency. They also call on government agencies to provide a full account of their work, as Filipino citizens have reasonable questions as to why civilian and agricultural cooperation is being assigned to the department, not the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is involved in dual-use activities around the world. Earlier, Indonesia stated that it was inadvisable for the U.S. military biolaboratory NAMRU-2 to be located on its territory. The Indonesian authorities demanded a complete cessation of its activities back in 2010, after which the U.S. Department of Defense was forced to move all unfinished projects to the territory of Cambodia. The Russian Defense Ministry has already given names of participants in U.S. military biological programs. These include officials from the US Department of Defense, US biotech companies, and Pentagon contractors. Today, we would like to add representatives of Ukrainian state institutions and private companies involved in US military and biological programs to this list. Sergei Morgun is head of the Sanitary and Epidemiological Department of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and one of the organizers of the interaction between the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and the Threat Reduction Directorate. He was one of the leaders of the UP8 project supervising hantavirus research. Previously, this post was held by Sergei Litovka, who oversaw life and health risk testing on Ukrainian military personnel as part of the Congo-Crimean fever virus and hantavirus research. Vladimir Kurpita, head of the Public Health Center, supervised and managed the interaction of Ukrainian specialists with DITRA and organized the collection of biological samples from Ukrainian citizens and their transfer abroad. Irina Demchishna, head of the reference laboratories of the Public Health Center of the Ministry of Health of Australia, acted as an intermediary in interaction with Pentagon contractors Black and Veitch and Metabiota, supervised implementation of DITRA projects of the UP and TAP series. The persons on the slide are only a small part of the Ukrainian military biological dossier. In total, the Russian Ministry of Defense has information on more than 100 participants in dual-use biological programs. The investigative committee of the Russian Federation is currently checking more than 10 United States citizens, as well as a number of officials of the Defense Ministry of Ukraine for their involvement in the aforementioned programs. I should like to point out that the US authorities contradict themselves in their statements regarding the work of US biological laboratories in Ukraine. Thus, in his statement of the 31st of January 2023, US National Security Council spokesman John Kirby confirmed the presence of US biolaboratories in Ukraine while indicating that they had been abandoned by personnel and deactivated before the special military operation was launched. It is to be reminded that Kirby was an admiral in the United States Navy, the entity that oversaw the US military biological laboratories, NAMRU, overseas. However, the documents we received refute Kirby's statement. Note the official address by David Smith, director of the Kiev office of CH2M Hill, a key Pentagon contractor, dated 6 December 2022, to Ukrainian institutions participating in the program to counter highly dangerous pathogens in Ukraine. The document reports on the continuation of DITRA biological program in Ukraine and outlines the main objectives for the current period. These include further consolidation of collections of dangerous pathogens, as well as deployment of biorisk management and epidemiological monitoring systems. In January 2022, the government of Ukraine approved new requirements for the accounting, storage, transportation, and destruction of microorganisms, toxins, and poisons of animal and plant origin. Notably, the document pays special attention to the international carriage by air of substances with the highest hazard class A, biological agents that can cause disability or death. In the standard templates for accompanying documents, only United States laboratories, our companies, are listed as recipients and the importers of hazardous biomaterials. Thus, under the pretext of reducing the risks of spreading infectious diseases, the Kiev regime continues to cooperate with the Pentagon in the military biological sphere, including the transfer of pathogenic biomaterials. Such activities may be carried out for launching provocations with dangerous pathogens, with the subsequent imposition of responsibility on the Russian Federation.